Hello and welcome to the Durham Talents channel. My name is Jesse Durham. For today's episode of our interview series, I get to sit down with Mr. Ryan Griggs. Ryan is a PhD student as of the time of this recording. He is the author of How to Buy Whole Life Insurance. Personally knew R. Nelson Nash, personally mentored by R. Nelson Nash and James Neathery, co-host Banking with Life podcast with James Neathery. I had an opportunity to meet him at a professional event recently that the Nelson Nash Institute put on. We had a great conversation, and he was kind enough to be able to come on to the show here today to talk about his personal and his professional IBC journey, and I hope that you enjoy. Ryan, I try to do justice by the things that you're doing in the wide world, but more occurs to me actually right now. So let me say a few more things if you don't mind. I don't mind edifying you because I've received a lot of value from your writings. Is actually another thing that I didn't mention in the intro right there is I've used articles that you've written for different subjects around the IBC in different cases, whether it was for charitable giving institutions, churches, and just different things that you've written for agents. So I really value the time to get to sit down and talk to you about your personal journey. I'm curious about some things, but then also the professional side, because I feel like I have received value for years now in listening to the podcast that you and James. It's a great work. I would say it's for me, it's the podcast for the mentors of mentors, if that makes sense. And then of course now you have released your book, and I've read it more than once. And again, I could see how the personal individual, the layman, from blue collar or white collar, it doesn't matter, America could pick up that book and then as a consumer benefit immensely. But also I can see where the professionals are getting a glimpse into some things that I think that other professionals aren't shared or just haven't shared. So I feel that I've been blessed because of both of those perspectives that you provide. I've said a lot here, but it's because I'm trying to do some edification for you. I'm very glad to have you here. Very much looking forward to our conversation. I appreciate you. How are you today?
Thanks, Jesse. Good to see you. I'm well. Good to talk to you. First one.
Right.
And let it be known that you very politely and perfectly asked months ago that we might do this. And it's to my own fault that I delayed things. So I appreciate your patience.
Well, I felt like it was a dance at the time. It just happened that way, right? It's like I
Yeah.
look back on it and I think it just happened that way. I'm like Ruth out in the field. It was my hap to light into the field of where there was a seat beside Ryan Griggs somehow at a restaurant. And of course, I would like to occupy that seat. That would be great. So I definitely
And you
was
did.
happy
You
to do
came
that.
right up, to your credit.
Right. Well, I had a buddy point it out to me, and he knows that I will, reference you and your articles and stuff with him. Another professional in our space, great guy, great friend, pointed it out to me. He said, maybe you want to sit over there. And I said, yes, sir, I do. And we had a great conversation. I did try to ask and ask in a way where it is, it's a dynamic from both sides, right? Like I'd love to have a great conversation with lots of people. I've had lots of great conversations with folks, but especially somebody that I listen to personally. Again, as a consumer myself, I've listened to you
Yeah.
before I was a professional, right? And then
Mm.
as a professional, I've listened to you and also so gleaned. So yeah, you have not because you ask not, right? So there's always that, but you want to be respectful of folks. So I do appreciate it.
Well, it's my pleasure, man. Let's get into it.
I love it. So take me back to whatever starting point you want. I would like people to know a bit about you. I mean, you live in Texas currently, but say anything about hobbies, family, the educational background, anything prior to, exposure to the infinite banking concept that you would like to paint the picture of.
Okay. Well, I can go on forever, so break it up as I move along. If things come to your mind along the way, please feel free to interrupt me. But yeah, so my name is Ryan Griggs. I'm from Southern California originally. Mom's side of the family still lives out there. I go back often, but I do live now in Rockwall County, Texas, just east of Dallas, and I've been here now for, gosh, I guess 4 years in Texas generally since 2016. Went to a lot of different undergraduate schools. That's a whole story unto itself, but finally finished with a bachelor's and master's in economics at Cal State East Bay in Northern California in 2015 and then 16. And then from the 2016 to 17 academic year, I was at Texas Tech in Lubbock, Texas, in far west Texas, where I lived there for 3 years in Lubbock, but what originally brought me there to that particular part of Texas, and what brought me to Texas generally was a PhD program in agricultural and applied economics at Texas Tech, where I completed 1 year. In fact, just the other day on Facebook, they show you the uh, uh, memories from long ago, right? And the one that came up literally just yesterday was when I passed the comprehensive exams in the PhD program in that first one I was in Texas at Texas Tech, 2016 to 17. So I did 1 year there. I passed the comprehensive exams that you take in order to bridge from the coursework over to dissertation work. And that went well, but I was miserable. And I had originally wanted to be a professor of economics, specifically in the Austrian school, and I got a whole education about what's possible there and what's not possible there in the States in these contemporary times. Economics today is not what it used to be. And so the short of it is sort of discovered that it wasn't going to be possible. It would be possible, but for me, not possible to continue in a conventional academic program en route to becoming a professor in the States. And it's kind of a God thing, but I met Nelson during my master's program in May of 2016, 17. Yeah, May. Yeah. Winter and then spring of 2016. And met him when he was 85. He was still doing his 2-day, 10-hour seminars at that time on a Friday and Saturday. I met him in Northern California, where I was just about an hour away from where I was going to school. And so it was just, perfect location, perfect timing. There were other things happening at the same time. You kind of get these synchronous sort of moments where a lot of things seem to be pointing in the same direction. And that certainly occurred for me in 2016 and into 2017. So by the time I was already in my PhD program at Texas Tech, I had already met Nelson, already had a policy. Bob Murphy, who is a co-founder of the Nelson Nash Institute, was a visiting assistant research professor at Texas Tech at the time. So I had a lot of interaction with him. He is now still my dissertation advisor on a separate PhD program. The PhD thing is maybe more complicated than it needs to be, but that seems to be my style. So that was 2016, 17. I met Nelson in 2016 after that first year of the Texas Tech PhD program, and then deciding in the summer of 2017 to leave conventional academia. I then met James Neathery, who you mentioned in the intro, the co-host on the Banking with Life podcast. And then it was off to the races from there. So basically since October of 2017 to the present day, here we are recording in the summer of 2026. So pushing 9 years, next year will be 10 years. All that time I have had and continue to have an exclusive IBC type practice. We don't do any marketing or sort of paid outreach or anything like that. People find the writing I've done on Medium, a blogging platform. They find the book that you mentioned, How to Buy Whole Life. They find the Whole Life Insurance Mechanics series on YouTube, a 7-part, 8-hour lecture series on the mechanics of dividend paying whole life. Hence the name, Whole Life Insurance Mechanics. But that's really been where my focus, my interest has been, and sort of the theory behind more or less advanced IBC implementation. I've built up a process sort of tailored to that approach, right? It's a very educational approach. So my process is slower. We spend maybe 3 or 4 weeks prior to ever submitting an application. It's been great. It's been successful. It continues to be successful. People often will find others who may be more active on social media or on the various video type platforms And there's another cohort out there that I call affectionately the financial entertainer class. And, um, someone's more likely to find that kind of material first, this sort of more marketing heavy type of approach. James likes to talk about the difference between attraction and promotion. My business is really structured on that latter attraction side. Uh, and the idea is that all the material that I've put out so far, that I'll continue to put out, is the kind of material that I would have liked to have been available when I was first learning about this. I kind of joke about it with clients now, but the first policy I have from a big four company could have been designed much better. Um, the joke is I've made every mistake that a person can make with my own policies first. Of course, that changed. I now have 5 total IBC style policies and pay a lot of premium. So we practice what we preach. Right? I don't have anybody or expect anybody to do anything I'm not doing already. But yeah, that's kind of what my presence is now in the marketplace. I found that the person who wants to really know why, I've got a Jim Rohn quote at the front of the book, right? About the how the fascinated want to know how, right? The interested want to know, will it work for me? The fascinated want to know how. And my work is for the fascinated. It's for people who want to know how, to the degree we can. I'm not a mathematician. I'm not going to go in and teach actuarial science at this time. And I don't know how much people want that anyway. I think they're looking more for how the principles that Nelson taught apply to their own financial circumstances. And my process is built to kind of train up an individual as their own advisor. We're very insistent about ongoing service, a big neglect in our industry, as I'm sure you're familiar with. But we do provide that ongoing service. We are here. We do, in fact, we would prefer to be the first point of contact rather than a life insurance company policy owner services department. So we're very forthright about service. However, the structure of our process, the material within it, is really built to, or designed rather, to train up the individual to come to understand their own financial profile in terms of their own capital. And then to be able to make informed decisions about how to manage that system, including expanding it or using loans or what have you. The broad, maybe I'll end with this and shut up for a while. The broad point here is to help people understand Nelson's principles and how they apply to the individual's circumstances, no matter the simplicity or complexity or scale or lack of scale in the financial profile. I could go on for a long time about that, but that's in general what we're doing. And as a result, we have been fortunate to 9 years now taking this kind of approach and have steadily accumulated more and more clients. Had the opportunity to do more and more business with them. But then I find that clients of other agents, and then other agents themselves, other advisors in and outside of the IBC world, seem to find some value in what we put out as well. So it seems like by addressing, the meaty substance of how do we apply Nelson's principles in one's own individual life, it seems that there's relevance of that discussion to more than just the individual agent. Or rather the individual consumer. It extends beyond the consumer to, say, the agent, even to home office staff. There's a life insurance company I won't mention, but he's working on his second order of how to buy whole life, and he just gives it away to agents. So I never expected that kind of thing to happen, but that's where we are in the marketplace, and it's a very unusual approach. It's different. In fact, with clients, I have to explain sometimes that, we're going to take it slower. We're going to take all the time we need. We're not going to take any more than the time we need, but we are going to take all the time we need to make sure that I'm confident, that you're confident, that you understand what you're getting, how you're going to manage it, and why. And we do all that before an application ever gets submitted. So if people are willing to take that extra time, not much longer, right? A couple weeks extra time on the front end, and if they're really searching for why and how, then I'm a really good fit for those kind of folks. There's a segment of the marketplace I'm not a good fit for, right? It is an exclusive IBC oriented practice. And that means we abide by Nelson's rules, think long range, don't be afraid to capitalize, don't do business with banks, don't steal the P's, rethink your thinking, right? These principles inform not only the structure of our business and our approach with clients, but then the material of what we share with individual clients. Yeah, let me stop there because that's probably enough for now. That's the broad strokes.
I have written down 6, 7 questions about what we have
Perfect.
covered so far. Well, it's obviously in my experience. I've already shared it. That's what I've experienced from your material, everything ranging from the book, the podcast, the Medium posts, all of it all together. So that's been my experience. I can concur.
Good.
Why economics in the beginning? All right, who goes to school for economics? What led up to that? I'm very curious.
Wow, what a good question. Yeah, I've had to sort that out for myself. So I graduated high school in 2010 and went, my first year of college was at NYU, Stern School of Business at New York University. And my major defaulted to business management. The truth is I had no clue what I was doing. Right. I wanted to go to New York. From Southern California, I wanted to go to New York. And I did at a good time, comparatively speaking. You know, here we are 15 years later. I'm glad I went then and not now. No, I'm sure parts of it are great still, maybe. But that was for business management. I had no idea what I wanted to do generally. I had no idea what my more substantive interests were beyond just the professional side. And what it was, so 2010, right? You had Obama 2008, and I'm in New York at NYU. Okay. Everybody is hard left, whether they knew it or not, they were. And good for them. I mean, no, not political, but the point of this is I discovered that I didn't know what I believed and why. And so I went online and started looking for, what's this politics stuff? At NY, rather in high school, I was in mock trial, I did basketball. I had a very local mindset, which was great. But in getting into college, this big wide world and people have all these opinions. And here I am, not knowing what I believed and why. And that was uncomfortable. So went online, and the short of it is I stumbled upon Congressman Ron Paul from South Texas, who still is alive and kicking and publishing often, far more often than I publish on the Liberty Report on YouTube. But found his material, and it was from him to I think Murray Rothbard was probably the next point of contact, specifically in articles that were posted on LouRockwell.com. Lou Rockwell's the founder of the Mises Institute, had his own website, LouRockwell.com, and he would post, and I'm sure still does post, things that economists have written. So anyway, through Ron Paul, my first encounter was on the political philosophy side, in libertarianism and political philosophy more broadly, and it was a short skip from there to the Mises Institute and to the whole world of Austrian economics, and in particular, the Misesian praxeological side of Austrian economics. There's different veins of that school of thought. We don't have to get into it too much yet, unless you want to, but
for the record, I did recently have a round table where several of us from the IBC community talked about libertarianism, Austrian economics. So maybe we need to have a second round and you jump in with us.
Yeah. I spent probably too much time in the political philosophical world, but eventually got beyond it into economics in particular. And now the purpose of this dissertation that I'm still doing is on the ontological foundations of economic science. So sort of a study in the philosophy of economic science. So that's only deepened further. And in fact, in part of what ultimately led me to get into business, be outside of conventional academia, was the observation that in Nelson's book, Becoming Your Own Banker, the word capital is mentioned 73 times, 72 of which is a clearly monetary type of framework. And if listeners don't know, the understanding of capital in Austrian economics today, conventionally speaking, is not monetary. It's not financial. The view of capital is what we'd call real or physical, material, right? Capital is kind of regarded as the reproducible structure of production, right? So productive goods, things you use to make other things, that's a productive factor. And capital, or the capital structure, consists of all of those productive factors and the relations between them, right? And then different economists have different specifications for, to nail that down more specifically and make it, their own. But the point of this was Karl Menger, who's the founder of the Austrian School of Economics, wrote a book in 1871 called The Principles of Economics, and he was Austrian, so he wrote like a German, and they have very long footnotes. And one of the lengthy multi-paragraph footnotes became, in the translation of that work, a series of paragraphs as part of the body of the text. And these few paragraphs that were originally a long footnote serves as the foundation for what's become Austrian capital theory today. And the short of it is that there's a neglected side of capital theory in the Austrian school, where capital is treated as monetary and financial. And of course, that's what we're doing with IBC, right? The IBC is a capitalization strategy. It's a strategy to systematically accumulate capital in an ideal environment. But that's a financial, a dividend paying whole life insurance policy is not a productive factor, right? It's not something that is typically regarded as something a businessman might use to go and produce something else and then sell it to consumers, right? It's not thought of in that way. Really, it's intangible. You have a paper document to evidence that it exists, but there's no physical material thing there, right? It's all very conceptual. And yet Nelson talks about capital in this IBC context in a clearly monetary and financial sense all throughout the book. Fun fact, Nelson Nash knew Leonard Read, who is the founder of the Foundation for Economic Education, and Nelson knew him for like 50 years. He would fly Leonard Read, who's an economist in his own right, from Irving on Hudson in New York, where Fee was located at the time, down to Birmingham, where, of course, Nelson lived. And Nelson would host Leonard to have seminars with his clients, like regularly for decades. And especially online and all the marketing and salesmanship, this is just totally lost. I mean, Nelson would say in his seminar, in fact, I found my recording of the 2016 seminar, I still have it. The whole first part was on Austrian economics. And a lot of finance people today, like, they can't even say the word, like Austrian. And then the eyes glaze over. I've talked at the Nelson Nash Institute 4 times. And, this is a group that's more interested in economics than the sort of conventional financial industry is. And yet, and this is not a criticism of people in and around IBC. It's really a criticism of the entire profession of financial advising. There is no economic foundation. There's no well thought out economic foundation. The most well thought out it gets is in Nelson's book, Becoming Your Own Banker. I mean, it's not written in this academic language. It's not clear that what he's doing is like advanced capital theory at the individual level. That's what it is, though. That's what it is. And so when people read Nelson's book and they get his presentation to a general audience, people often don't know that Becoming Your Own Banker, the book, is a compilation of teaching materials that Nelson would use in his 2-day seminars. So it's just a compilation of the material that he would share with people over 10 hours, a Friday and Saturday, which itself was a structure that he had to work out over time. He tried seminars and he tried everything that you could do, like the lunch and learns and talking to the home office staff of life insurance companies. And he finally settled on this model, which he got from Leonard Read, this sort of 2-day seminar model. And Becoming Your Own Banker is the compilation of those materials. So it is a teaching text. Like, there's a classroom style approach here even though the material in the book is what some have mistakenly regarded as too simple or not enough. None of that's the case. It's all there. It's all there, right? The guy spent decades in the life insurance world and then packed everything that he knew that he would share with a new person into a 92-page book. Okay, this is incredible. And there's a reason for that. Part of my grind, part of what like lights me up is there's a reason for that, right? And it's not just because the pretty numbers on the page, right? The way cash value grows over time. That's great. Yes, wonderful. He was teaching economic principles without so much as coming out directly and saying it. And so, I mean, I kind of continue that work. I see myself continuing that work. And, you know what? I talked earlier about clients who are an especially good fit. Clients who are not an especially good fit for my practice are people who don't particularly want to know. And it's been a professional challenge and learning opportunity for me to understand that maybe the majority of the marketplace wants that. They want the turn and burn, fast, get it done quick, low information sort of approach. And there's lots of reasons for that. People come with their own misconceptions, prior experiences. They don't have life insurance agents. Come on, I mean, are these not the scum of the earth? I mean, this is kind of the impression that you'd get if you paid much attention to like CNBC and things. Like, you know, I've joked before. I sell dividend-paying whole life insurance according to the infinite banking concept. So we have two levels there of things that most people have no sense of, and so it's difficult. It's difficult, and it's very different. And there's a lot of preconceptions or predispositions that have to be dealt with in order to help somebody truly structure their own understanding with respect to their financial circumstances, to understand what it means to have a certain composition in the financial profile, right? Where is the capital? Where is the monetary value? What's it built up in? What's that property look like? What are the characteristics of those particular classes of property in which we're building up this ostensible financial value that's supposed to serve us later in life down the road? You know, what's the economic rationale behind all that? And it just continually amazes me that in a profession, a very old profession, hey, hundreds of years, like more than the formal organization of the country, like this is very old. Hundreds of years old, going back to England, talking specifically about the dividend-paying whole life insurance product and life insurance generally. I mean, we've had some time to kind of figure out the economic foundations here, one would think. And yet, it seems so shallow. And you start, you talk to somebody, it's kind of this paradox, right? It's like very few want to talk about economics in the financial advisory profession. And yet you've got clients who, they may not put it in these words, but are looking for an understanding of the economic structure of their profile. So it's like the key to helping people comprehend the structure, composition, quality of their financial profile, of their capital, is economics, the very thing that the financial profession doesn't want to go in with people on. It's like, what? So, I mean, the professional development challenge, educational process for me has been in coming to understand that for all sorts of reasons, there is an appetite for a quicker turn and burn kind of conventional sales, commodified sales process, which nobody likes. Let's just say that. Nobody likes that, right? They may think they want it, but just like nobody likes getting eaten up by spam calls, nobody likes getting, papered over with all the spam mail that comes. Nobody likes dealing with a fast-paced, sales-oriented financial advisor. No one likes that. The only reason, the only reason that anybody might ever put up with that is because they've had negative experiences in the past. And there's a sort of defensiveness. And maybe they've not had the experience directly, but somebody they know has. Right? And so that's like what we're coming up against. And I have had to learn that not everybody wants this slower, educational-oriented type of approach. And so we're really, we're for a particular niche, a particular segment of the market, and we have a lot of great success. People seem to like it. It goes well. It works well for those for whom it's a good fit. And it is economics heavy. I don't expect anybody to become a master of life insurance or a master of economic theory. That's not the point at all. But, we do need to understand capital. Capital is the core of the financial profile, right? The monetary value of property with acquisitive purpose. It's not net worth, which is an accounting fiction. Okay, there's no looking at the current market value of the asset. As soon as you look at the current market value of the asset, the moment changes, right? You've got to have a different frame of mind for understanding the anchor or the core to the financial profile. And that anchor is capital, specifically in the sense of the monetary value of property with acquisitive purpose, right? It's different from net worth in that from the outside looking in, from the third-party observer analyzing somebody else's financial circumstances, you can look at the market price of whatever durable assets the individual may have, and you can sort of get a proxy net worth, but that is different from capital, right? Capital is money you can get to, right? Monetary value with acquisitive purpose, right? For instance, if someone's got a vehicle, the single or vehicle for the household, or even two vehicles for the household. Most people, when they're wondering, hey, where am I going to get money to do X or Y, take advantage of an opportunity, obtain some cash flow, what have you, most of them are not thinking, gosh, if I just go leverage my car, I can borrow against the value there and get to that money and use that. Most people do not think that way, right? There are assets which do have a market price, right? They're durable assets. They would sell on the secondary market. But for whatever reason, the individual may not regard that value as available to him or herself to use for their own economic purposes, right? And so the value of the vehicle that provides the primary transportation for the family, that value might be included in net worth, but would not be included if you looked specifically at this economic view of capital, right? The closest really that the industry gets is, say, the value of the primary residence, right? Because people typically have, especially if they own the home for some time, some positive value, monetary value in the home. We're all familiar, and certainly people who go online are familiar with home equity lines of credit, different ways of accessing that value. So maybe the value of the real estate is viewed more by the individual as a source of money to go and use for their purposes. And so somebody might count the equity they've got in a home, for instance, as part of their capital. But my point is that the capital in the exact sense from that we find in people like Carl Menger and Frank Fetter and Ludwig von Mises, great economists of the early and mid-1900s, we find a distinct view of capital there that is monetary, and it can become the core. And if you can get someone and oftentimes there are people who want this information, who want to understand how to think about their own profile. And that's really what we're solving here, right? Because the industry's failed catastrophically for all sorts of reasons at that, right? In fact, you might even, if one were a little more suspicious and skeptical, you might even say that that's the point, right? When you have an industry built on assets under management, your assets under their management, it's not in their interest for you to reclaim control over that value in property that you own contractually. So anyway, there's lots of reasons one could get skeptical about it, but the point is that in this very individualistic sort of way, one can opt out, and you can choose. You still can acquire dividend-paying whole life insurance. It is still possible to become your own banker. Yeah, and it's just a matter of deciding, and to my mind, how to help somebody understand what it is they're doing when we are implementing IBC in one's own individual circumstances. And what we're doing is making a plan for the systematic and optimal accumulation and deployment of capital. That's what it is. And so when, people with other experiences or more exposure to the conventional market, want to start talking about other types of assets, the conventional assets that one might contribute to or accumulate as part of a quote unquote financial plan, like participation in tax qualified plans, acquisition of stocks and so forth. And there's rarely, if ever, in 9 years, I don't think I've had this ever occur once, where there's a specific purpose that's understood from the outset as to why somebody would make those allocations. I've never encountered that, right? There's reasons, don't get me wrong, but reasons are different from purposes, right? The people at work do it, everybody does it. This is the thing that I was told to do, and everyone's doing their best, right? We're all trying to pay attention and do better. I get that. But rarely do we get down into the specific purposes of the holdings that we find in the financial profile. And you start talking through some of that, and then you incorporate the whole banking side of things, right? Another aspect of conventional financial advising that is just completely missed is accounting for the cost of capital, not just by rate, right? If people like to brag if they bought their home prior to COVID, like, oh, I have a low APR. Okay, go pull up an amortization table with your low APR and show, and you can use any online calculator and it'll specify the total number of interest dollars paid. Mm-hmm. And you can take that number and divide it into the total payments. So you get your true cost of capital. And I don't care how low your APR is. Mm-hmm. That quantity of interest dollars paid is huge. Mortgages are easy to beat up because they're special offenders. They're horrible. They're the most egregious form of consumer debt that an individual may have, mm-hmm. In terms of the true interest cost. And yeah, so anyway, IBC in my world is a way to reconfigure over time the financial profile to more specifically optimize for capital accumulation and deployment. And we happen to call that the infinite banking concept. But economically speaking, that's what we're doing. And everybody should do it. Because as Nelson made the point, everybody's banking, right? You're either paying interest on debt, conventional debt, mm-hmm. or you're giving up growth you otherwise could have had. Every purchase is financed. Mm-hmm. It's just a matter of whether you own the entity that is providing the financing. And the way that happens in dividend paying whole life is we acquire dividend paying or participating whole life. Right? We establish residual claimancy. We establish the right to receive our share of the surplus generated by the company. We get that in the form of a dividend. And those dividends can become large over time. They become larger the more premium you pay, the longer you pay it. Mm-hmm. It's almost as if all of this works together. And the more you engage in it, the better the outcome. What else would one want in the financial? What else would there be to do in the financial world? And let me stop there. There's plenty more, but I don't even remember the question.
Well, and that makes sense because what's happening here is because I started with a clean sheet of paper and I'm more than halfway filled now, wanting to go back to other questions that arrived to me earlier, but I keep adding more as we go. So that's the trajectory of where we're at. I get it. Ignorance is broad is one of the things that you made me think of. I do believe that our human nature lends the vast majority of us just to be ignorant to lots of things. I mean, I was exposed to libertarianism. I was exposed to economics, let alone Austrian economics, Ryan, because of the infinite banking concept. And I've met people in our community that, the opposite was true. Their father knew Leonard Reed, and they came to infinite banking through economics and libertarianism and whatnot. So that's all neat, but I would still say that ignorance is where we can contribute the vast swath of the majority of our experience, I think.
Yeah, people ask, if they get exposed to this idea, as Nelson said, IBC is more caught than it is taught. So you get somebody who catches IBC and wants to do it, and one of the questions always is, or at least is a lot of the time, why am I just finding out about this? Why doesn't everybody know? Why isn't everybody doing this? And that's a legitimate question. We can ha ha, joke about it, but there are legitimate reasons for why. The dividend paying whole life sales is not a high return type of business. This is operated on the mutual principle. So this isn't if you wanted to go out and juice quarterly earnings, you wouldn't say to the sales force of a life insurance company, hey, go out and sell a bunch of dividend paying whole life. No, you'd go out and say, sell universal life, right? Or some variety of that, or some more conventional assets under management type approach, participate in your tax qualified plan, what have you. And that's what people are surrounded by. But when they catch it and they kind of pierce the veil of that ignorance for the first time, there can be like a kind of a deluge of, okay, tell me more. Like what else is here? And that's my area, right? That's where I just like that quote in the book, right? It's for the fascinated. It's for the people who really want to understand why. Yeah, and if you stick to that long enough, you may very well end up at some economics. And for the better, I think.
Yeah. Well, so I didn't show up here with a lot of questions that I knew I wanted to ask. But one that occurred to me was that I actually did plan on asking you about, why did you write To the Fascinated? So I think you've answered it for me. Jim Rohn, something that Jim Rohn said, influenced you. That's where that came from. But anything else? I mean, I'd never read an opening line that said something even similar to that I can recall. So it did intrigue me. Anything else around that, To the Fascinated?
Well, there's even more. I mean, like in the introduction, I pretty much come right out and say, like, if you haven't read Nelson's book, you need to put this one down and go read that. Like, this was not written to sell books. There's no money in that anyway. It was
right. And you've clearly said it's not a replacement for becoming your own banker, but I was just curious about your perspective of For the Fascinated. I felt fascinated when I was exposed to infinite making, so I feel like I know what that means to me, but I was curious about where it came from for you.
Well, I mean, a lot of factors that contribute to it, but I go back to Nelson, he would talk about focusing on the one. Okay, James knew him for 16 years, I think it was, maybe longer. And he would tell stories about how, when James would tell stories about James's interaction with Nelson, and one of the things Nelson would share with him when James would share with Nelson that, new policies had been placed, Nelson would say, okay, one more, go do one more. But it was always one. Okay, it was always the individual. And people who sat in on Nelson's seminars would say, and I certainly experienced this myself, he was a very dynamic speaker in these small groups, perfect setting, where you'd feel like he was talking just to you. And other people would report the same thing. It was very, as he would say, eyeball to eyeball, right? One-on-one, individualized. And I hope that there's that kind of spirit is in the book. That was my attitude in writing it, was I wanted to just talk to the one, and which in another sense means to be very specific. Okay, so this idea in financial services, as I was taught when I worked for the Big Four, one of the Big Four companies for the first 2 weeks in business, was, the financial advisor is the coach, right? And the individual, the client, is like the owner of the team. And the coach is going to direct all the players on the field. In practice, that means coordinating with attorneys and accountants and so forth. And, being the quarterback for the team, right? Sports metaphors, my favorite. I made a post on Facebook once. I'm like, no, you're everything. You, the individual, you're the owner, you're the quarterback. It's your team. Like, you're the one making the decisions. And by the way, the outcome is coming down to you. Okay, so you're the one that's going to enjoy or not the results of this process, not the agent, not the coach on the field. I tell people nowadays, I'm not going to give you recommendations. I'm not going to tell you what you should do. We're going to talk through some material. And like Nelson says, if you know what's going on, you'll know what to do. You're going to tell me at the end of our advisory process, what it is you want to do. which company, what premium structure, how many policies, what's the total premium outlay, the reasons for all of that. The individual is going to tell me that. And they do at the conclusion of our advisory process. But I say all that to say, like, if I'm going to talk to one person in this book, I have to get specific, right? It's got to be I assume some information. It's part of why I'm so forthright. Like, if you haven't read Becoming Your Own Banker, you need to go read that first, because it does assume some knowledge, right? Some initial orientation. And then we're going to focus, as specifically and precisely as we can throughout the book. And I have to assume some past understanding, some prior work in order to have that foundation in place. The book would be hundreds and hundreds of pages long otherwise. So that's the goal, man. My goal has always been to niche down, as it were. Nelson talked about the one. We have a principle of specialization under the Division of Labor in economic science. My goal is not to be all things to all people. I do not say yes to everything that comes my way. Last week, I think I told 2 or 3 people I don't think we're a good fit. They're deluged by the marketing material online. I had a guy once ask me, I don't remember his name, great introductory call, and at the end of it, he goes, "So do you have a community, where you can talk to your other clients?" And I know that this is a thing that others do, and that may well be great, but at this time, I don't have that. I'm a huge stickler about privacy kind of stuff, and so it's always freaked me out. There's other reasons why I'm suspicious about that, but I know other people do it. Point is, here, this was like the breaking point for him. He just vanished after that. Oh, you don't have a community? Well, then, off into the wilderness we go. And it's like, that's how we're going to make decisions for the selection of, financial professional or financial advisor who's going to help implement a strategy, is whether we have a community with that was this deciding factor. And this is just one example, right? We're not a good fit for everyone. And the book takes that seriously. And I'm really just talking to the people who want to know more about why the policies work the way they do, why the companies work the way they do. There's a different kind of ownership that comes when you understand what you're doing, right? Rather than taking somebody else's word for it, taking instruction, putting your questions aside, allowing yourself to be bedazzled by the social media, video, and financial entertainment. You can do that, and it'll be quote unquote easier early on. Okay, but you build a house on stone for a reason. Okay, we have a very high persistency ratio. The vast majority of policies placed have remained in place. People continue to pay the premium, and which is in their interest, right? That is how you maximize cash value and death benefit and whole life policies, to pay the premium the policy allows for. And hopefully it's built so that you can do that for a long time. Okay. Yeah. And if the individual does that, they'll be better off. But to understand why one would want to do that requires spending some time on the education first. And that just is inherently slower. The book alone is like 230 some odd pages, right? There's quite a bit of material. And the fact is that there are folks, for perfectly understandable reasons, I'm not criticizing, who are just not interested in that. And that's okay. I've had to learn that that's okay. I did not always think that way. But I do now. And the results are great, right? The results are that I have the capacity to establish fairly intensive relationships with each client. I mean, how can you not when you've got, 4 or 5 strategy type calls prior to ever submitting an application? It's going to happen. And it works better for them, So, yeah.
What an interesting dynamic. I recently let a prospective client go, even, said I could make a referral, but said from my part, it doesn't seem like we're a good match. And we had multiple calls, which is interesting. But again, still better to find it out and make that choice sooner rather than later. But there are
Better
there
for
are some
everybody.
things there are some things that can be red flags, and you do describe some of this very well in your book as well. Um, the request for an illustration. My answer is no. That's one of those things that if you had it, you're not going to understand it. Just
Yeah.
just for the simple fact, and that's not. I don't mean that derogatory towards anybody. Who would? Who would? The numbers are going to be possibly broken down in six different ways. The numbers are what the numbers are. Actually, that's one of my favorite maybe talks that you and James have had, which is um, men lie, women lie, the numbers don't lie. Yeah, but that doesn't mean that you can interpret them either, though, right? So, like, there could be six different perspectives on the same numbers, on the same,
Yeah.
policy illustration. But if you look at one perspective and run with it, then you only have partial information, which is dangerous. It's misleading anyway. So, yeah, recently experienced that myself. Even as developed as I feel like I am now, I know I've not arrived in my process either, but it is much more developed now, and I just don't have those as often either, which I'm grateful for. And all that to say that one of the things, you and I had a quick phone call years ago, and I can actually remember two things, but one of them that was the biggest for me at that time anyway was developing a process. That's the only other time that we had spoken before seeing each other at the restaurant recently was, quick phone call. You were kind enough to take that, and you encouraged me to develop a process, and I feel like I did. I feel like it was, a long time coming, and it's been constantly changed and everything, but that has been very helpful. So I'll
Yeah.
say that to say that I appreciate that part as well.
Everybody's better served when there's a structure. Okay, the person who is a good fit, the individual who's not a good fit, better to know that all as soon as possible. And one won't know that unless there is a particular structure. I kind of view it as you go to the dentist, okay? There's a structure. My dentist must text me 10 times to confirm an appointment. I mean, it's so structured. That's like too much, but it's very structured, right? You go in to see a professional, a medical professional, whatever, a vehicle professional is going to fix the car. You know, a structure provides orientation and it allows the both parties to determine if there's something to do here. And if there's not, better that the individual knows that, better that the agent knows that as early as possible so that they can go and the individual can go and be served by the individual or team that's best for them. And the same is true for on the agent side, the advisor. The process thing was that was one big early item from James Neathery was the emphasis on developing a structure. And one does need to develop that structure. It's not a drag and drop sort of situation. Okay, these kinds of, it's not going to serve you well if you don't come up with it. Okay, if you're pulling in what somebody else has prepared, look, maybe that's better than nothing, right? Maybe there's a bit of a start there, right? You're going to use some templates or you're going to use something that others have developed. Okay, maybe better than nothing. But you want that to be sustainable and to serve others like over time, like for a long time, like if we're thinking long range, maybe it's got to come from the individual. It's got to come from within. I've had agents, I think we've talked about before, but at one time I had 6 contracted under me. It's a total failure. There's one individual, Austin, who's great and he's continued. But everybody else, it's like, where's the drag and drop? Where's the process? Right? Helicopter me in a structure. And it's like, no, that has to be developed by the individual. And there's got to be an understanding of the reasons for it. It provides it provides the framework, it provides the orientation, it's something specific that the individual client or consumer can identify and evaluate for themselves to determine if there's a philosophical fit, everybody's better off if there's a structure. And this illustration farming, illustration harvesting. I laugh while you were saying the question. I was going to look for the email, but I got an email the other day from somebody had submitted through the website and griggscapitalstrategies.com, and the first line, there's an area where someone can leave a free response message. And this person had obviously like copied and pasted what he was sending around to other people. And one of the other people he had sent this to was apparently somebody named Ben. I'm Ryan. My name's not Ben. He pastes in this form, a message to Ben. And it's like, okay, talk about red flags. There's number one. And then later on in the message, there were instructions, which is my favorite. We haven't had a single call, even though there's an extensive Q&A, FAQ type deal on my website. There's a 3-part, hour and a half introductory overview on the platform. All this is free. It's totally, you don't have to talk to me to get it. Like, it's all there. Right? The information's there, including my name. And but in this message, he gave instructions as to what should be included on the illustration. It should have a guaranteed and non-guaranteed side, and there should be a PUA rider. And I'm like, oh, should there be? I kind of joke a little bit. I don't want to be harsh on the guy, and I'm of course not going to name names, but it has become a custom, and people have been encouraged to contact multiple agents in order to harvest illustrations without any formal process, talk about process whatsoever. And that's just an automatic no thank you. I think my response to the immediate inquest or the immediate inquiry was, the rest of the message was, he was asking for, there was the illustration. And he said in there that he was gathering proposals to meet the objective that he had stated in the message. And my response back was, participating in proposal gatherings is outside the scope of my practice. I'm so not interested. You want to print out a piece of paper with big numbers on it. You should not buy dividend paying whole life. Period. End of story. You want nice, big, illustrated numbers? You need to go get a universal life policy or an index universal life policy, or just go buy the index. Like, this is not where we juice numbers to get as big as possible early on. The first rule is think long range. Like, the things that one would need to evaluate in the design or composition of a policy as illustrated must be set on some sort of philosophical foundation. There has to be some specified objective going on. Because if that's just a vacuum, which online, it basically is a vacuum, right? It's higher number, bigger, better. I mean, such a heroic, impressive ideological victory by Wall Street and these institutions to get people to think by default, without ever specifying it in words particularly, that the thing to do is to get the bigger number sooner, bigger number sooner, and that would be better. And it's like, why? What's the purpose of that? Well, I want to build a lot of cash value now so I can get a policy loan, so I can go make my money outside the policy, because you don't make your money in the policy, as well-known people online have said. It's like, okay, I don't know what that is, but it's not IBC. And it's not a long-term capitalization strategy. And it's not how you maximize cash value and death benefit in the policy over one's natural, statistically likely mortality. And it's not how you maximize the value of the estate for intergenerational capital transfer. But why would it be? All those things are long-term things. They're not even on the map to begin with. It's higher number, bigger, sooner. And it's like, I've joked, and it is a joke. I don't mean it too pejoratively, but it's like, you can live on fast food if you want. The drive-thrus are open 24 hours, and they're quick, and they'll satiate you and you'll get that immediate hit. Maybe you don't live on it for your life. Maybe it's not sustainable over one's natural life, but you can do it. You can do it all day. And people do. The majority do. In and around the IBC footprint. And no marketing, so no cold calls, no cold outreach. Half the time, a third to a half the time. By the time someone talks to me, they've already talked to one or two other people. They may have already acquired policies from other people. And they go through our process and they learn things about the policy they already have from the agent who didn't walk them through what the different things meant. With companies, from policies from companies with which I am not contracted. And they're going through my process, learning about those policies from other companies, from another agent, none of which they knew. It's like, I mean, you'd have to sit down and imagine what professional failure to do one's job really looks like if you wanted to imagine anything more spectacular than that. I mean, I would not feel comfortable. I don't know how people feel. I could imagine why, but putting a policy in the hands of somebody who you haven't spent the time to make sure that they understand it. It's like going back to this guy who, submitted the illustration request through the website. It's like that approach is really working. I mean, here you are, and he was in his mid 40s, I think. No policies in force, no premium paid, no cash value built, but we're going to send out the instructions for what we want to see illustrated. I mean, that's wild. That's why, and I think part of the reason that happened, they get negative experience, the reputation of life insurance agents, the conduct of other agents in and around this business, this high volume, high pit, rapid turnover, get it in force, get it done. As James likes to say, the life insurance industry has earned every black eye it's received. And there are agents today who are not helping the situation. And I still get fired up about it, even though I should just focus on the next one. Yeah. Yeah.
I guess I'm impressed that person got a response at all whatsoever from you. The one thing that does occur to me personally is I feel very much in my infinite banking exposure like you articulated how you felt going to New York time at that particular time with the scene. And like, I'm very grateful for how I was exposed. And I do feel for the person who's exposed, however they're exposed to the general, like very general idea of, what should I be doing in personal finance nowadays? Because, I got to see a live presentation, hour and a half long, from somebody who'd personally implemented the concept for some years at that time and was a practitioner, authorized practitioner, knew Nelson. Like it was a good way for me to be exposed. Not everybody gets that right out of the gate like I did, getting a phone call from a buddy. Hey, there's going to be a guy talking about becoming your own banker. I was open-minded enough to say yes. Thankfully, I was at that point in life where I was, because I could definitely have seen in a prior, year or who knows, but I'd been like, I don't have time for that. But thankfully I was, but it was done right from the start, so I do feel like all these, I mean, there's a right way to do anything. You could just have some manners and whatnot for one, but I do feel
helps.
for the person who is exposed the way that they are now. And that's what makes me value so much, things that I do online with video material. That's a way I like to communicate. But then your book, other people's great podcasts like yours, and et cetera. So that's why it's so important.
And I don't want to be too harsh. I mean, it's these are good kind of counter examples for how we do things. There's companies like to keep track of policies that were offered that were not taken by the client. And I once saw these, the company will send a survey, why did this policy, they want to know, right? We went through all this work. It didn't get put in force. Why? And the first time that arrived in my inbox, I was confused by it. Like, what are you talking about? Like, maybe a handful or two have been not taken in my practice for unusual reasons. Something genuinely came up, you know. And so what I'm saying is, like, the process that we do take for people who are interested is extremely effective. And those interactions can be so productive and so rewarding. I've had clients like crying on the phone because of, I mean, this is after policies have been in force, you know, and the education continues, talking about that service thing after a policy goes in force. And, you know, one in particular, next town over, has a small business. It was a current client, had been a client for a couple of years, and, you know, found himself not using policy loans often. And which, by the way, is fine. It's okay to pay a premium, build cash value, not take loans. But he would regularly find himself in a position where for a given purchase, he just would have the cash available to buy whatever it is. Why take a loan if you're going to take a loan, use the money, then turn right around and pay off the loan? You're just going to incur some additional interest cost. When this happens, not necessarily, but generally when this happens, it's a sign that not enough premiums being paid, right? Because if there's a lot of cash on hand such that we can pay for the things that come up and we don't have to, we're not in a position where we need to take a loan, it can be because there's not enough premium being paid. And so I just walk through, and it may not be the case, right? It may be plenty. There could be other reasons, but we talk through this kind of thing. And come to find out, on the initial round of policies, it was kind of a dipping the toe in the water thing, right? The available premium source really was the net figure, you know, after everything's accounted for, what's left over. And he was conquering Parkinson's law, being frugal. There was a meaningful percentage of that available to pay premium. So great, first start, right? Great place to get started. Well, once you catch it, you know, once you see it, you can't unsee it. And he was familiar, because of the nature of our process, very familiar with the growth pattern in cash value over time relative to the premium. And he had some sense, some intuitive sense of a scale that was not there yet. And it was because the premiums were relatively low compared to what his financial profile could really justify. And so the conversation became one about, okay, how do we then incorporate the business cash flows in the context, business cash, let me just stress, okay, the business personal differentiation is an artifact of the IRS. Okay. If it's an LLC, it's probably an S corp, it's an S corp or it's pass through. Either way, it's your money. Okay. And it's all taxable. So whether it's in the business bank account or whether it's been distributed to the individual is a matter of accounting. Okay. Has the transfer been made or not? And so we had to kind of dissolve this really artificial differentiation between business and personal that, again, part of the general financial inertia that's out there. We take this IRS differentiation and then say, you know, the money that goes to the business as if it's behind a Great Wall of China, you know, instead of available to the individual to pay a premium. And so we talked through what it would look like to utilize some, not all, but some of those business cash flows to expand the premium. He came back to me the next week, said, I want to do this much more. Substantial. I mean, 3 or 4 times what he was already doing. And he comes and brings that, you know, and I love this. My returning clients, I'm like, look, we've already done our illustration review. You know, I'll provide illustrations for a returning client. And almost without exception, the returning clients are like, yeah, I don't need to see it. I know what's going on here. And it's like, perfect. Still going to send you the illustration, but perfect. You know, he gets it. You don't need to see the numbers on the page that are going to be wrong as soon as you hit print, because he knows what's going on. And that's the kind of outcome that occurs from an educational style approach. And I think one of the reasons it's not super common is that approach is it's so unpredictable. There's no calls to action, no like steady influx of cash flow. You can't really put it on an Excel sheet and diagram out and think about what you're going to earn. It's totally it's like a faith-based, it is a faith-based type of approach, backed by what Nelson said: if you know what's going on, you'll know what to do. And so I believe that for people who are fascinated, do want to know, who then come to know, they often then know what to do. And I don't have to tell them. I don't tell people, right? They tell me, as it's, in my opinion, how it should be, right? These individuals are owners of this policy. It falls completely on their shoulders to properly manage and take care of this policy over time, or set of policies over time. It's on them. So my opinion, my view is, if I don't insist on the educational foundation necessary to generate that kind of outcome I just mentioned earlier, where someone's coming back saying, hey, I want to do this much more because now I understand better. If that educational foundation is not laid, that kind of outcome will not occur. And in fact, you show me the new client intake process, which may be more or less structured, and I will tell you within 10 points the range of the persistency that results from it. And I'm pretty confident I'd be spot on. It's like, you can tell, if a tree by its fruit, if someone's had one call, maybe two, and a policy's gone in force as a result of that, my experience has been, especially for the newcomer, the likelihood that policy is optimally suited for that individual's financial circumstances is almost zero. People can have other experiences. There's always exceptions. Policies can go in force under a quick, low education, low information type of approach. The individual may pay premium over time. Look, the first policy I acquired in May of 2016, shortly after meeting Nelson, is a disaster. But I still own it, still pay the premium, right? There's always room for development. It's not like any of us here have arrived in knowledge, right? There's no arrival syndrome here. In fact, there's quite the opposite, right? A sustained eagerness to understand better. And if you have that, and you have a competent agent who can answer the questions, God, I can't count the number of times I've had people who tell me, yeah, I was talking to so-and-so, I found myself asking questions that they didn't seem to know the answer to. If they respond, some of them just stop responding. And it's like, what? That's wild to me. Like, what is this profession? If not to educate people on what it is they're doing. It's in the agent's interest. It's like, it blows my mind. As James has said, if the agent would just focus on the individual, on what Nelson taught, everything else that the agent says he wants will come. And in fact, there will be more of it, more clients, more income, whatever, more, if one takes that approach. But it's uncertain. It's faith-based. You can't write it down. You can't put it on a spreadsheet. Oh, I want to see the numbers. Okay, well, nobody in business only makes those kinds of decisions based on the numbers. I mean, you do have to engage a little understanding of what the numbers are showing, whether they're illustrated numbers, whether they're numbers on a policy, whether they're numbers on a spreadsheet. There's got to be some, and hopefully a lot, of foundational educational understanding that's already been done. And in my view, maybe an unpopular opinion, in my view, if the agent deprives the individual of that educational foundation, then you're doing a disservice to the individual. And I'll be a little harder, the individual does themselves a disservice if they don't seek to understand before they want to sign on the line somewhere and pay a premium. And so for folks who are convinced that, they've arrived, they've said they're sending instructions, they know what they want to do, no contact, no calls, but they know what they want to do. Yeah, no. You do that, you should do that with somebody else. Because it's not the kind of practice I'm building here. Yeah, I guess I had some thoughts this morning.
But I don't know that you ever don't. From outside looking in, I don't know that you ever don't have thoughts. I was on one email where some people that I knew and that other people you would know, other people would know in our space, and then other people that I didn't know. We were just all in the head of an email, and here's what I want, here's what I need, and just
Oh, mass
we
email.
were all right there. I'm like, yikes.
Yeah.
Yikes. Um, Man, I want to ask so much. I want to ask about, what you found, what your frustration was, all the way back to where you were talking about you wanted to go down this econ route, but I don't know, the bureaucracy, the conventional route in educate. Like I got questions all the way back to that part of our conversation. I partly want to know if I'm one of these financial entertainers, but I doubt that you even see
You know the
my
answer to
social
that.
media or anything. Huh? What'd you say there?
You know the answer to that. That is
Good.
not the case.
Right.
I don't see that. I certainly don't have you in mind. And then look, I'm not the IBC police either. It really is. I mean, it really has been a development, because I knew Nelson for 3 years. I really cared about him. I mean, I'll get emotional if I think about it too long, but, um, that I've kind of found myself to be surprised by the lack of, um, like critical analysis of the nature of the industry and the products we sell. Like this sort of, and this is getting to why I would not class you in that group of financial entertainers. This sort of like breathless, like motivation speech type of thing. I find that so unappetizing and like disturbing. Like when you can tell that people are skipping over the logic of the reasoning for why to do something, and they're just insisting in a very promotional way that somebody go and do this thing, and, and the manipulation in the marketing really gets me too. And you do have folks in the business, life insurance industry broadly, who get involved in other types of business. Um, they'll charge a subscription, or they'll have a group, or they'll do real estate, or they'll do tax planning, or there's some really bizarre iterations of things that, financial things that people are encouraged to do from agents in the life insurance world. And sometimes you get the impression it's like, is there any room for a premium? Like, can we just pay a premium? Can we pay the premium and build the cash value? Like, can we do that? Can we go back to what Nelson taught and do that? It's kind of bewildering to me sometimes. And I don't get that sense with you. There is room. I'm kind of a radical type of person, I guess, and I get fired up, but there's certainly room for a positive, kinder disposition. I'm all for that. It's not to say you can't approach this business happily with a positive disposition. You can, and I think I do, but you know what I'm talking. And I'm sure people who have encountered some of this material online will know what I'm talking about. The sort of like rushed, almost breathless, like do this, do that. Oh, okay. And it results in this kind of attitude. I call it eager investor syndrome, where, we have people who probably grew up and whose family probably grew up relatively undercapitalized without access to significant quantities of financial value. Let's put it that way. This is my upbringing. It's a lot of people's upbringing. And we don't notice the effect that has on our financial lifestyle and on our decision-making process. right? When you're capital in a developed catalactic monetary economy is the way that we impose our will on the material world, right? You buy something, you get the right to live in it. You buy something, sell something over there, right? It's how we express our authority voluntarily is through monetary exchange. And monetary exchange only occurs if we've got capital. And if you've got an individual and maybe a family over the generations who have been conditioned to believe that the thing they need to do with the money they make that they don't spend is to give it up to some other financial institution and a product they don't control, you end up with a family and a habit, a lifestyle of systematic undercapitalization. You take that person, you expose them to becoming your own banker, you expose them to some of this financial entertainment online, they see a glimpse of what's possible here. They do end up they manage to pay a premium, build some cash value. And then it's like a FOMO, a fear of missing out, this overwhelming sense of, I have this capital and I got to do something with it. Because I grew up in a whole system and my family grew up in a whole system where we're not used to this. Right? We were told to put the money in Fidelity or in the market or in the 401k or whatever. This idea of building up a bunch of capital that we have access to and control over, foreign thought. Of course it's foreign. It's never been taught before. So you take that kind of person, you expose them to that kind of material, they pay the premium, they build the cash value, and then you have this eager investor syndrome where it's like, oh my God, I need to get a policy loan and go invest in something right away. Positive economic value added, if the hypothetical advertised return on the quote unquote opportunity exceeds the cost of capital, which is the policy loan rate, you have positive economic value added, positive EVA, as Nelson talks about in Becoming Your Own Banker. And the industry regards that, generally speaking, as a sufficient condition to say yes to the opportunity. And my point to people and its current client, this is a difficult thing for people. My experience has been this is difficult to either convey or to receive, or it's difficult. This is uncharted stuff, I think. And it is in the financial profession. The idea that what one should do is just pay the premium, build the cash value, become acquainted, become familiar with the idea that you have the contractual right to get access to this money, to go do whatever it is you may want to do. I mean, just getting familiar with that involves breaking all of this conditioning that has constantly berated people in subtle, implicit, and explicit ways to get rid of their money, give it over to some institution, your assets under their management. So to break that, and then great example. I had a client in Nebraska, still have a client in Nebraska, multiple policies, paid premium, built cash value. They're in farming. So used to having significant debt to manage the thousands of acres. Okay, it's a lot. So had to use outside financing, still use outside financing to support the operation. This individual bought policies. We did a 1035 exchange, got rid of some universal life, paid premium, built cash value. And sure enough, here comes the recruiter slash development officer for a company who is looking for investment. And, like Nelson said, if you have access to a large pool of financial value, opportunity will track you down. And this was a opportunity, quote unquote, tracking this individual down. And the potential firm who was seeking investment wanted $100,000. And the client asked me about it. Clients like, haven't done this kind of thing before. Sounds really appealing. Client was excited. Cool technology, agricultural related. They've got the money. They could do the investment if they wanted to. And so then this client was talking to me about it, and I responded with some questions. I was like, look, I don't know anything about any of this. I'm lucky if a plant in this house doesn't die. Okay. I don't know anything about farming. I know a lot about capital. And here are some of the things I'd be interested to know if somebody wanted money from me. What's my position? What am I buying? If something goes wrong, who gets paid first? Where do I stand? Right? What's my priority in getting paid? And the client responded, I didn't think of these questions before. I'm like, well, ask them, see what happens. The end result of this was the individual trying to raise the money went and discussed with the general counsel of the company the questions that my client had asked this fundraiser. And the general counsel ostensibly, allegedly informed the development fundraiser person that my client should have no further questions, that all of the information has been given, and the client should make a decision as to whether or not to invest. But there are no further outstanding questions. This is the general counsel of the company telling this to my client. And so what looked like this wonderful, magical type of technology opportunity to invest, advertised rate of return exceeds the policy loan value or exceeds the policy loan rate, positive EVA, let's do it. We got eager investor syndrome, built up this cash value. What are we doing? Need to go make some money outside the policy. Better take a loan and go do it. And then with the most basic questions, she asks and gets that kind of, there are no further outstanding questions. I'm like, what else do you need to know? Move on. Swipe left. Bullet dodged. Hallelujah. But that initial excitement, oh, I've got this this is the eager investor syndrome. And it's supported and encouraged by online media. These people have other programs, other special programs they're going to do, right? They're going to make money on whatever it is. So sell the policy, get the premium paid, build the cash value, take the policy loan, go participate in this other thing that the person who's also the agent has to sell you. And it make it look really good. Put it on, big numbers, positive EVA. And in her case, this client's case, she dodged a bullet. Couldn't answer basic questions. I mean, imagine what would have happened. If the general counsel is telling a potential investor, no more questions, ma'am. I mean, imagine how that would have worked out, had she invested. Crazy. So this eager investor syndrome thing, it's okay. And part of the economics of it too, we haven't had a major financial correction since 2008. We're pushing 20 years. Okay. A lot of people in this business, myself included, were not of age to sell life insurance at that time. Okay. It's been a long time. Most people in this business, well, it's an old, I think the median age I looked 2 years ago or something was like 64 for the independent agent. So, there are some guys who have been around for a long time, but there's another cohort that is of a younger generation that's just getting in, that has no lived economic experience of a major financial correction. They have no sense. If they do, they're hiding. I mean, you wouldn't be able to tell if they knew. No sense of what it can look like for a major correction to occur, for banks to stop lending, for liquidity to dry up, for an individual to be unable to get to the money they need to keep this entire superstructure afloat, right? Because we paid the premium and built the cash value and took the loan. We're leveraging everything up to their eyeballs because positive EVA, right? That's the thing. So let's leverage everything. And then, as James says, there's never a problem until there's a problem. And there may not be any problem until there's a problem. But when there's a problem, there's a problem. When something goes wrong, when the source of the liquidity that's needed to keep everything up and running, when the renter in the real estate property, because this is a good example, had these other individuals, not clients of mine, clients of somebody else, okay? 5 years ago, husband and wife, they're now in their 60s, so they were in their late 50s at the time. They acquire policies. They were told, pay a premium, build the cash value, and then go get into hard money lending. These people had zero real estate experience. Zero. But look at all the money you can make. Renters, cost of capital, positive EVA, the whole shtick. Okay? And there's never a problem until there's a problem. For the first 4 years, in their words, they were printing money. Okay? 20 grand, 20 grand a month. Net. Printed. This looked so great. Year 5 came around. Of the 4 people they had lent money to in this hard money lending business, 2 of them stopped paying. One of them screwed them over. They're in litigation as of this call, which was a few months ago. The other one seems to be honest, but he just screwed up and wasn't able to pay investors back on time. They were so levered. They needed that cash flow so much. They had so little margin that when that occurred, everything fell apart. They were going to move to Tennessee to live with the adult daughter, to live out the rest of their life, to be close to family. I think they were in Indiana at the time. Now, not only can they not afford to make the move that they've been planning on for years, they'll be lucky to keep the house they're living in now. They're looking at accepting a renter in their 60s to be able to pay the mortgage because they took this advice from financial entertainers to pay the premium, build the cash value, leverage everything up to your eyeballs. Systematic undercapitalization, indulging this eager investor syndrome. You've got the capital, go spend it. Positive EVA, look at the book. And so they did. And it worked for 4 years. And then in year 5, catastrophic failure. Lucky if they'll be able to keep their primary residence, eating $7,000 a month, negative cash flow. It had been like 2 years of this, trying to get out from under these properties and out of the lawsuits. Yeah. That's what happens. That's what happens. And there's a loving Banking with Life hate group on Facebook, right? That love to talk about how the two people who founded it contacted and spoke with both James and I. Both of us fired them. And then they went and started a online social media rage group where it's all short-term thinking, illustration shopping, illustration harvesting, bigger number, sooner, better, all of this type of deal. And they cannot stand these kinds of points. They cannot stand this kind of attitude because it's all about why. Really, it's a certain level of disgust with the whole life policy. It's like a dirty pill you have to swallow in order to build some cash value to go take a loan right away, right? No sense of embracing membership in a mutual enterprise, no sense of the source of a dividend, no sense of the value of the base premium, none. Agents, they're commission hounds. And this is the kind of result that you get. Now, will there ever be liability? Will there ever be any comeuppance? No. No, because you make it past, the first 3 years, maybe the first year, depending upon the carrier, past the clawback period. Agent got paid. It'll be fine. Agent will be fine. The policy owner signed everything in that application and in the policy documents, right? Whether they know it or not in their mind, they've said yes with ostensibly express intent by signing everything. Company's covered. Agent's covered. And as James has said, 2 out of 3 ain't bad. Who's the one left out? The one left out's the individual who, when things go unexpectedly, they'll attempt to call and say, hey, what's going on? And maybe the agent answers the phone. Maybe they answer the email. Probably not. Who wants to deal with that? Life insurance agents' commissions, heavily weighted percentage of the base premium paid in the first policy year. That was long ago. And what, I got to deal with a problem now? If the agent's still in the business, this is a high turnover business. I think the broad statistics, 90% are out before the first 3 years. 90% of those are out by the 5th year. Are these fly-by-night people going to be around in 5 years when this stuff starts to fall apart? I mean, come on. So it's wild, man. It obviously there's frustrating times. I don't want to be too negative, though. There are very positive, there's this experience recently with just last week, individual coming back saying, hey, I want to do this much more. That happens a lot. We have continuing clients come back. Hey, this is what I want to do. Perfect. We'll build it up. Schedule the application call. It becomes, people do not have a sense of, and because the financial profession has not sought to implement this, but there's an old school financial professional, old school profession from like the 20s and 30s, back when this was a respected profession. And being a whole life insurance agent, doing something nobody's ever talked about or heard about, infinite banking, is not a respected profession. It's respected by the people who come to know. But the ones who don't have any sense of it, of what it is from the outset, there's a stereotype there that reigns supreme. And the result of that is you have financial professionals who treat ongoing service and ongoing contact with clients as a cost. And it's a cost to be minimized. The contact with the client is a cost to be minimized. Let that sink in for a minute. The predominant view of these agency builders out here is that ongoing contact with the client is a cost to be minimized. And so it gets minimized. And when you get problems and things start to fall apart, well, all the disclosures were signed. You've paid the premium. 2 out of 3 ain't bad. And it's wild to me because it seems so puzzling, because it's like, it's in my view, it's in the agent's own best interest to be an ongoing support system, to be an ongoing source of service. Not every client, a minority of clients are going to come back and get more. And maybe it'll become a majority over an extended period of time. But it's not appropriate for everybody to expand at all, much less rapidly. It can't happen. It's kind of the statistical likelihood. People who do IBC acquire multiple policies or tend to acquire multiple policies over time. But, I've had situations that it's one and done. Whether it's asset repositioning, older client, what have you, there's not going to be a whole slew of new policy purchases. Fine. And the purpose in providing the service after the fact is not to dwell on new applications that may come from that family. That is not the purpose. The purpose in the old school traditional model, this is the 1910s, 20s, and 30s, was to build up a residual. A career agent stayed in the business for decades, selling policies, to where he built up a book of business that was large enough in-force policies where the itty-bitty tiny residual commissions paid in policy year 2 and beyond across the book of business are enough to provide some sort of passive cash flow, quote-unquote retirement for the agent. That's the purpose. Building a book of business that sustains. You might even get the sense that this is about thinking long range. That's why you can see, and I try to express to clients, like, Nelson's principles should not only inform the design of a policy. That is so narrow. Nelson's principles should inform the design of the policy, the nature of the relationship, the structure of the relationship, the nature of the material, the fundamental philosophy that guides the agent's practice. To the extent Nelson's principles are adopted throughout the whole structure, you have a better outcome for the agent. And of course for the client, because if things are built out long-term, there is such a thing as mutual benefit. It's okay for the agent to get paid, company to receive premium, and for the things to work out well for the policy owner. That does still happen. There is still mutual benefit in this modern economy. And who wouldn't want that? Sometimes I've, as I mentioned earlier, I had agents under me, and I've, except for one, kind of backed out from that. I don't have the capacity. And you encounter people who have prior financial experience. And for me, it's just really not going to work out. Because you can't, there are certain things that have to be unlearned to fully adopt Nelson's principles and the infinite banking concept. And if you don't take a long-term oriented view, then you won't have the necessary strategic anchor, the necessary strategic objective that should inform the nature of the process, the design of the policy, and the nature of the relationship with the client. That's what it means for IBC to be a financial philosophy, to be something more than a sales system. these life insurance companies, home offices think that IBC is a sales system. Okay, well, what is it when there's no additional sale? What do you call it then? Does it get to be an educational relationship then? So there's a lot wrong, my opinion, in this business. Not everybody, again, I'm not the IBC police. There are great guys out there doing things that, you know, are not exactly the same as I'm doing, but are properly serving clients. Doug Jones, Barry Dyke, James Neathery. You know, there's other names. I'm not saying I know everything. I have not arrived. And let me say this, last thing I'll say. There's a little question on my introductory form that people can fill out on the website. And one of the questions on there, you know, how would you characterize your level of understanding of the infinite banking concept? And it's multiple choice. One of the answers on there is I've mastered it. And when people click that, it's like, oh, you've arrived. By the way, multiple people, I've mastered it. I have a separate question. Have you read Becoming Your Own Banker? No. Okay. So you've mastered the thing written in a book you haven't read. We're not a good fit. It's not going to work. You know, and there's a more fundamental reason for this. Nelson used to give the story that Leonard Reed would show. You know, Leonard Reed would have in a seminar room, he'd have a round table, and he would take a coin, a penny, whatever. And he would say, the interior of the penny or the coin is what you know. And the table that the coin is on is what you don't know. And the perimeter of the coin is the margin between what you don't know and what you know. Okay. So then he removed the coin, and then he put like a coffee saucer on the table. Okay. A larger circumference on the table. And he'd say, larger interior space, larger area of the circle, greater knowledge, right? You knew more, you know more. The interior of the circular shape grows from a coin to a coffee saucer. However, with more knowledge, you increase the perimeter of the circle from the perimeter of a coin to the perimeter of a saucer. And his point was, the more you know you don't know. Because with the larger saucer, yeah, you've got a larger interior space of the circle to symbolize greater knowledge, but you also have a greater perimeter to the circle, indicating or suggesting that even though, and maybe because you accumulated more knowledge, now the amount that you know you don't know has also increased. Mastery is an illusion. If anybody claims they're a master, they know it. They've arrived. That's why the question's on there. What they're doing is expressing a contradiction. Because if that were true, one would never claim total mastery. The only way that one claims total mastery as one's knowledge grows is if one is ignorant of all the things they don't know. That's the only way that occurs. But if one is aware, then as more knowledge is accumulated, as that interior space of the circular object on the table grows, well, that perimeter grows too. You know, if you think of a satellite dish, you know, face down, even larger circular object, even greater perimeter. Right? And that's why that question's on there. And without exception, in all of those situations where I'll have an introductory call, it's like, oh, there's all these things that I didn't think of. It's like, yeah, of course there are. Because you claim to be a master, and maybe you do have some knowledge. You know, a lot of the times the people, if someone's read Nelson's book, they don't respond to that question, checking the box of I've mastered it. They know, because they know the arrival syndrome. But you get these people who go on and absorb all this financial entertainment. You get these people who can find the letters I, B, and C on a keyboard and type them together. And they watch a bunch of that. And well, I've watched 50 hours. I know. Okay, did you go to the source? Well, I listened to the audiobook. Okay, that isn't the source. The source is a physical black cover, fifth edition, becoming your own banker, 8.5 by 11 size book. That's the source. So you can spend all sorts of time that you might like, consuming this other financial material. None of them, myself included, came up with any of this. Might want to go to the source. Maybe, in other things, kind of a thing to go to the source. Okay, this isn't a religion. I'm not saying it's directly analogous, but if you go to church and no one's talking about the Bible, it might be a problem. May not be able to master Christianity without going to the source. That's true in religion. It's true in everything. Something goes wrong with the car. What do you read? The manual. Get something, order furniture. Oh, God, I ordered outdoor furniture. IKEA. Took all weekend to build. What do? Consult the source. Go to the directions. Go to the instructions. But I could go watch a bunch of videos and develop my own confidence based off of what I'm seeing online. None of that. Maybe helpful, maybe interesting, maybe good, maybe beneficial. I might learn something about carpentry or building furniture. Maybe beneficial. It's not a replacement for going to the source. And agents who, and this gets back into that turn and burn high volume thing, people who identify with the IBC or the IBC world, who then go and do not insist on laying a proper educational foundation, do not insist on getting into the material. They are disserving people. An agent does people no favors by putting a policy in force without an educational foundation being laid. You're just doing conventional finance, really. You're creating a future problem, which is what, for instance, tax qualified plans are. Future problem, future tax liability. You put a policy in force, you don't lay the proper educational foundation. If things go wrong in like the first 8 to 10 years, that individual's losing money if they surrender that policy. They surrender it after the policy is cash on cash, more cash value than what they've paid in premium. They surrender the policy. Now they got a tax problem. This only works out for the individual if people keep what they get. Now, things can go wrong and you can lay some exit routes and you can be strategic and risk conscious and all that. I'm not saying that you don't do any of that. But if you deprive the individual of the educational foundation, you are not helping anybody. The agent included. And the agent who continues to provide service after the fact, who picks up the phone, who answers the emails, who holds themselves responsible for that kind of thing, the pay for which is, come on, negligible, right? Residual commissions on life insurance, it's almost zero. So it becomes a matter, I think, of character and principle. What kind of business are you going to be in? You want to be in a commodified sales approach, product pitching? Go sell pharmaceuticals. You'll make more money. The commission hound thing cracks me up. I'm like, tell that to the people that I've said no thank you to. Count all that commission. Anyway, let me shut up for a second.
But I want you to, and I don't want you to. I felt the obligation that we were getting close, that I'm just going to have to listen. I would let you just keep going, and I would just keep asking questions. But I don't want to also get in trouble by letting you run over, a hard stop time either. Because I would like you to feel very welcome to a future conversation. For one thing, there are lots of things that I've written down 3/4 of a page now, almost a full page, of things that I would like to ask. And then I've already alluded to the round table, where I feel like that's an interesting way to discuss a lot of what you've brought up just naturally in our conversation. That's not necessarily, it is part of your story because you've acquired these experiences and everything that you're sharing, but it's a different format. It's a different venue. All that to say, again, I I want to say that you're welcome. So you can opt in where you would like to future conversations. You'll let me know. I'm very appreciative for the ground that we have covered so far. Let me, of course, ask. Well, no, let me also couple it with saying if you haven't watched Ryan's mechanic series on YouTube, do that. If you haven't realized that he writes on Medium with very specific and detailed, nuanced topics, check those out. If you've not got your copy of How to Buy Whole Life Insurance, make sure to do that. Otherwise, Ryan, where could folks contact you best again? I know you've mentioned your website, but one more time, please.
Yep. Everything's at griggscapitalstrategies.com. There's an extensive FAQ there. People could spend a lot of time with that.
And nobody's messing up on that question now. If they go.
And you can create a profile there it's free, and I don't even know how to send spam. So we don't email for this kind of thing, but if one wants to create a profile at griggscapitalstrategies.com, the login button in the upper right-hand corner will take you to a little 3-part, 90-minute total presentation on how we operate. For current agents, I appreciate the interest in becoming an agent right now. I do have an essay on the Medium platform explaining why I don't do that anymore. So I may have an offering upcoming for current agents and sort of advanced IBC enthusiasts, but I'm going to leave that under wraps for now. More to come on that front, but that's where people can get the info. The Medium is ryandgriggs.medium.com. The link's also on the website. The audiobook for the book you mentioned, How to Buy Whole Life, I narrated and is on Amazon, Audible. The hard copies are available on the website, griggscapitalstrategies.com. I think that's it.
Fantastic. Well, I'm personally very excited about the future works that are still veiled at the moment. All right, tell me literally what you need me to do. I would have asked, I would have talked for 2 more hours. I would have asked rapid fire questions. I would let you even hear my outro, but if I need to let you go so that I'm on time with you, I will let you go right now.
I appreciate that. I can do a lightning round here at the end.
Okay. All right, so let's jump into it. What is a recent favorite book or podcast, obviously other than your own, but something you're into right now?
Oh, I don't know if I'm ready to talk about it.
Could go to the next question.
Let's just say 12 USC 411. We'll leave it at that for now.
All right. How about a favorite hobby?
Hanging out with my dog back there. That's Lucy.
Okay, that was going to be a future question. We're a German Shepherd family hitherto anyway, and yep, you've got a Great Dane.
Yeah, so hanging out with her, playing catch, going on walks, working on the house, kind of boring stuff. Movies. That's about it.
Would you throw an all-time favorite movie out at me?
Oh, the one that comes to mind immediately is Mrs. Doubtfire.
Hello.
Yeah.
Okay, I love it.
Watched it multiple times and cried laughing multiple times as a younger person, but yeah.
I'm quite convinced
can't go wrong with Robin Williams.
Right. I'm quite convinced that his interaction with Disney too, and his voices had some influence on me as a young child.
Yeah.
How about, is there a hidden talent that people may or may not know that you have?
I'm not a bad cook.
That's a winner right there.
Yeah.
How about a favorite quote or saying?
Oh man. The one that comes immediately to mind is Nelson, if you know what's going on, you'll know what to do.
Always relevant. What's one of your go-to healthy habits?
Healthy habits? What are those? No. I bike in the morning. Actually. Yeah.
There you go. That's a great one. Absolutely. Who's one of the most impactful people in your life? I mean, you've thrown out a lot of names of people that you have met and people that you haven't met that you read behind and whatnot. So it could be somebody you've already mentioned. Obviously, it could be somebody maybe that you haven't though also. So I'll leave it to you.
Yeah, it's got to be James Neathery. People may have seen the Banking with Life podcast. I mean, there's a professional relationship, but there's really a lot more to that. It's a very unique relationship. So, yeah, that one for sure.
Okay. Early bird or night owl?
Oh, both. I know it's not good. No, when I'm doing well, early, 5:30. Getting back from travel, for instance, might confound that for a week or two. So it's a process to get back into it, but early if I can get my head on straight.
Sword or hammer?
Sword.
That's fun reading your face while you were answering that. Awesome. I love it. What characteristic do you value most in somebody?
Authenticity.
And then I'll leave you with this one. There's lots more I'd like to ask you on all fronts. But I got this question from my boys at the dinner table. Kids ask great questions. If you had the ability, would you rather be able to breathe underwater or fly?
Fly.
Very cool.
Question. I do love the water. It's a close second, but I've had dreams flying and it's awesome. So,
right.
To do it in real life would be neat.
Yeah. Exactly so. All right. Well, I can't express how appreciative I am. I sincerely hope that people benefit from your works like I have by going and reading your articles in your book and listening to your podcast and everything like I have and like I do. I appreciate the time with you, Ryan. I'll give you the last words to you. Anything?
No, man, my pleasure. Great talking to you. Sorry to make you wait for so long to even respond to your nice request. I apologize, but it's nice to be here with you. Good talk. We went longer than I thought, but nothing new there. I struggle with deadlines. Anyway, so I knew that going in.
Fantastic. I love it. Well, that was an absolute pleasure, of course, for me to have Ryan on. His contact information will be below in the show notes. You can find me at durhamtalents.com, and it is my hope that you live and leave a lasting legacy.